Hello, Banjo here, and welcome to another episode of Video Games Worth Taking Your Time. Last time we looked over Cameo, Elements of Power, and today we are looking through my favorite video game of all time, Banjo Kazooie. Now, Banjo Kazooie has quite a history. It started off as a Nintendo series until the creators Rare got bought out by Microsoft. So now they're Xbox characters, but after so many years, Banjo-Kazooie actually returned to a Nintendo console for supposedly just a one-time thing where they appeared in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So, Banjo-Kazooie, it was on N64, and then it was given an HD port on Xbox 360, which is also available on Xbox One through Rare Replay. So yeah, don't be fooled. Just because this game is from 1998, youngsters, doesn't mean it's a bad game. I hear a lot of stories of people who never heard of this game. They played for the first time and they fell in love with it. I mean, heck, that's how it was when I first played the game. It wasn't my first video game ever, but it instantly became my favorite when I first played it. But yeah, this game is very colorful. Like, one thing I love about this game is, although it has very limited graphics, it's still decent for what time it was made in. I mean, there are some games where they look just so blocky, you can't tell what anything is supposed to be. But I felt like Banjo-Kazooie, the people at Rare, they did a really good job at helping players understand what they're looking at. You can look at all this green stuff, you can tell it's supposed to be grass, you can see all this brown stuff, you can tell it's supposed to be like rocks or mountains or dirt. They do a good job with the texture work as well. I mean, just look at the water, for instance. When you jump around, you actually see like little ripples from the splash effects. That was a really cool detail. A lot of video games didn't really have that kind of detail. Heck, there are even video games to this day that still don't have that kind of detail. Yeah, I thought this was a really cool detail as well. When you beat the game, the main enemy, Gruntilda the Witch, she gets trapped underneath a rock that fell from her lair. And so I thought it was really cool how she's still trapped there. This is one of the first video games I can think of where beating the final boss actually affects the replay value. I mean, there are some video games where it doesn't save record that you beat the game. So every time you go back to restarting your file, resuming your file after beating it, it takes you back to the entrance of the final battle or something like that. So Banjo-Kazooie, it addresses that the witch has been defeated, as seen by her struggling to get out of the rock still. Now, if they ever made an HD remake of this game, I do think it would be nice to have some kind of replay value, though, kind of like what Banjo Tooie did, the sequel. That allowed you to replay certain aspects in the game without having to start a new file. And I think that's one thing a remake could really benefit from. Have there be a way to have a way to go back to the final battle and try it again. Or, especially, Grunty's, Furnace Fun, which was like the little trivia show at the end. I hated how you could only do that once and you couldn't revisit it without starting a new file. Well, that's an interesting little detail. They actually bothered animating Banjo's curtains kind of like blowing in the wind. Yeah, most games at this time, if they had like curtains on a window, they were just stiff. Animators usually didn't bother animating them, and so that was kind of a really cool detail. And here's Banjo's pet goldfish, Roystein. He doesn't really play a role until the second game. Even then, it was not a very big role, but it was a little optional reward you could get for helping him. He teaches you to swim better. Yeah, I always thought this was kind of cool. Like, Banjo-Kazooie is one of the first video games I can recall playing where you actually got to explore the main character's house. See, like, where they lived, and that was kind of cool. I mean, technically, there were games that did this before, like Donkey Kong Country, but as for 3D platformers, at least, this is the first game I can recall that ever did that. And there's a really cool secret. I'm sure a lot of you already know about this, but if you stare at the picture of Bottles the Mole, you'll activate like these certain challenges where you complete the puzzles and he'll give you these little cheat codes. where if you go into level 2, the beach level, Treasure Trove Cove, you go inside the little sand castle. If you type in the codes that Bottles gave you, Banjo will go through some really strange transformations. So I thought it was a really cool secret. However, if they ever made a remake of this game, I would appreciate it if they have it where once you unlock those codes, you don't have to bother going back and recompleting those puzzles just to have the code activate again. I thought that was extremely pointless. Yeah, another thing that's one thing I forgot to mention. During these videos of Banjo Kazooie, I'm gonna mention how I think they could improve upon certain segments if it was ever remade. Now, there's always those kind of people where when it comes to a remake, some people want it to be as loyal to the original as possible, like the Crash Bandicoot remakes or the Spyro Trilogy remakes. However, I feel like Banjo Kazooie, if they really want to win people's attention, they need to listen to the criticism of people who played these games and understand that there are some flaws in this game. I mean, this is my favorite video game of all time, but I'm not afraid to admit it's not perfect. There are definitely areas that could have been fixed up. So for starters, I think a revised camera system would be great. Originally, the N64, the console this game originated on, had a very limited controller. There was no right analog stick. You just had these 4 yellow buttons called the C buttons. C up, C down, C left, and C right. And those, you had to use C left and C right to rotate the camera. But nowadays, video games have become more excessive, where you can rotate the camera up and down and have better sensitivity over the camera control. The camera control in this game is very stiff, and the camera even moves on its own a lot during certain areas, which can make some of the controls a little tricky during some parts. And there's certain areas, like the sandcastle I mentioned, where you type in the cheat codes. It's in a locked camera position, which is pretty tricky for some of the, when you're trying to type in some of the letters on the floor. So yeah, that's one thing that a new camera system could benefit from very well. So this is the first official level in the game, Mumbo's Mountain. Where I was previously was both Spiral Mountain and Grunty's Lair. Spiral Mountain is basically the training level and the entrance to Gruntilda's Lair, which is the main hub world, the entrance to each level. So yeah, I remember thinking Banjo-Kazooie was a very unique video game. It was really cool to have a game where you were controlling 2 characters at once. You were controlling Banjo, who did most of the movement, but then you were controlling Kazooie, who did most of the attacking. Technically, you could say Kazooie did more of the movement, depending on how you played, but Banjo's mostly her transportation, but she's also his transportation. They both work together. Now, many could argue that Kazooie does most of the work, and that's one reason why I love how in Banjo-Tooie, they gave Banjo a much larger role. They had it where there were certain times where in order to progress, he and Kazooie had to do the hardest thing in their life, which is split up. But it was splitting up to work together. Yeah, I love the music in this game. Grant Kirkhope, he is such a great composer. He also did the music for the Viva Pinata games, the remake of Mickey Castle of Illusion, Yooka-Laylee, the spiritual successor to Banjo-Tooie, and oddly enough, he also did the music for, what was it? Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle for Nintendo Switch, and that was a really good soundtrack. He also did the music for Donkey Kong 64, Perfect Dark 64, GoldenEye 64, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I felt like this game had a really good, like, sense of progression. I remember, like, when I was a little kid and I had no idea what to do. It just, I spent so many hours having fun just trying to figure out how to get through this game. So, like, when you first start out, Banjo does not have many moves. He can barely jump, he can't attack, and you have to find, these little molehills where Banjo's neighbor, Bottles the Mole, lives, and he'll teach Banjo and Kazooie new moves to progress. So, like, in this level, there's a lot of steep hills that if you try running up them at first, you won't be able to go up them until you find Bottles, where he'll teach you how to use the Talon Trot, which allows Kazooie to stick out of Banjo's backpack and start running on her own feet, which allows her to travel up these steep hills without slipping. However, it doesn't work on every hill, though. For instance, this area, the hills are too steep, so it leaves you wondering, how the heck are you supposed to get up that? And it turns out you need a transformation from the local shaman, Mumbo Jumbo. Now, Mumbo, he has the ability to transform Banjo Kazooie into different creatures. So in this level, he turns you into a termite. And the termite is strong enough to crawl up those extra steep hills. So Banjo Kazooie is one of the first video games I can recall where I actually 100% completed it. In fact, to this day, I still haven't 100% completed Banjo Tooie. I found all the jiggies in that game, but I still cannot get that last Cheeto page that is unlocked from beating Canary Mary in a rematch in Cloud Cuckoo Land. I hate that part, and if they ever make a remake of that game, they need to scrap that part entirely. Or somehow change the gameplay to make it more fair and playable, and not a frustrating button mash of luck. It is ridiculous. But, ugh. Mumbo Jumbo looked a lot creepier in the original game. I like how in Banjo Tooie they revised his mask to, if I'm not mistaken, in the original game, it was said in the manual that Mumbo Jumbo was cursed by Gruntilda to, have, like, this skull mask stuck to his head. And for some reason they gave him like a pink, fleshy, or scaly appearance. I don't know why, but in Banjo Tooie they toned down his creepy design. He no longer looks scaly or fleshy. He looks pink still, but I like how he no longer has like that kind of creepy looking texture. And he now entirely has a skull around his head. In fact, I believe they said that they revised Mumbo to the point where that's actually his head. He's no longer wearing a skull mask. He actually has a skull for a head. I thought that was kind of cool. I don't mind that they retconned like what originally was said in Banjo Kazooie, because I honestly liked what they did with him better in Banjo Tooie. I thought his design was better, and I kind of liked how you got to control him a little bit. Apparently some people didn't like his role in Banjo Tooie, but I for one personally didn't mind it. I thought it was fun. And the textures in this area look pretty good, especially for an N64 game. Now, there is a slight difference when playing on the N64 compared to Xbox 360. For the most part, almost every graphic that was in the N64 version is repurposed in the Xbox version, but they polished it out to look a lot smoother and less blurry and pixelated like it did in the N64. That and the Xbox 360 version also has, along with being HD, it's also got widescreen support. One thing that I wish a lot of the other Rare classics were bothered given in Rare Replay, like Conker's Bad Fur Day, or even Conker Live Reloaded, I really think those games could have benefited from getting a widescreen support. Unfortunately, they do not, but Grabbed by the Ghoulies, though, it was nice to see that that game actually got a widescreen HD treatment, unannounced especially. Now, I could definitely see the difference in that game without split-screen comparison, because I played the original Xbox version on Xbox 360's backward compatibility, and I could definitely see the big difference on the Rare Replay version. So yeah, one thing I love about Banjo Kazooie is, like when you find Mumbo Jumbo, he'll give you the transformations, and they're not too useful, but they were still really fun to experience. I remember like always getting excited whenever I saw a new level in Banjo Kazooie, and I was wondering, if Mumbo's hut would be in that, and then whenever you saw it, it's like, oh boy, how do I get to it? And then once you get to it, oh boy, what am I gonna turn into? But one thing I definitely think a remake could benefit from is giving the transformations more to do. A lot of them are kind of helpless, and it would be nice to give them more attacks or objectives. And so here's another thing I would change in the remake. I'd change Brentilda's role. Because originally, throughout the game, you run into her and she gives you these random facts about Gruntilda, and you think they're useless until you get to the entrance to the final battle, and you have to go through a random quiz show, and some of the questions are based off the answers that Brentilda gave you, and that's just so frustrating, because then it forces you to go back and try to remember them all. And so that's one thing I would definitely change. I think they should keep the quiz show. I thought that was a fun part of the game, but I'd get rid of the Gruntilda questions. Nobody liked them. But, so that leaves you wondering, so what would they do with Brentilda then? Well, I think there's plenty of things they could do with Brentilda. They could still have her hiding throughout Gruntilda's lair, but I think what they should do is make her kind of like a hint system. Kind of let you know, like, so it's like for players who are having trouble finding certain jiggies, you should just go to her and she'll let you know which ones you haven't found yet, and give you a hint on where to go next. I think that would be a great, solution. And another thing I would change is the warp cauldrons. So, this game does not have a very good job at allowing you to travel throughout previous areas you visited. I mean, there are these little cauldrons where when you find two of the matching color, you jump into them and they'll warp you to another area, but some of them feel really pointless. So this one's a little convenient, the one that takes you all the way to the second level, where you find some of the more medium range levels, but I feel like it would have been easier if they kind of took inspiration from what Banjo Tooie did. Banjo Tooie replaced the cauldrons with silos that warped you to certain checkpoints throughout the Isle of Hags, which was the hub world of that game. And I feel like that's what they should do for this game. They should make it where the cauldrons take you to entrances of the levels themselves. Or better yet, they should have a pause menu and let you quick travel, kind of like what Spyro the Dragon video games allowed you to do. I mean, they can allow you to optionally travel to them on foot for those who prefer, taking a stroll while playing a video game, but for those who are kind of in a hurry to try to beat it as fast as they can, that's where quick travel would come in handy. Another thing I would love to see in a remake is, if they ever remade Banjo Kazooie, I wouldn't mind seeing them expand the game a little bit. So, it's like in Banjo Tooie, they expanded the formula of having, magical transformations in certain levels. They upgraded it to where there's a transformation in each level. And I would personally love to see how Banjo Kazooie could tackle that. If they were to add transformations that were not in the levels originally, what would they add? So the beach level, like, would Banjo be able to turn into a crab, an octopus, or some other kind of sea creature? I'd really love to see them expand that. And like I was mentioning earlier, it'd be nice to see them expand some of the other transformations. So, like the termite, all he can do is jump and climb up steep walls. It'd be kind of nice to see him get, like, some kind of, like, nibble attack that can allow him to bite through certain plants or something. I feel Banjo Kazooie could benefit a lot from being an expanded sequel. Especially considering how the original Banjo Kazooie had a lot of ideas that were scrapped from the final version, and I'd love to see a remake allow them to restore some of those features. Yeah, I remember this room was always kind of a mystery to me when I first played the game. So this is actually the way to open up the final level, but it's not available fully until a much later point in the game. You have to activate a switch at the actual entrance of the final level, and then it adds like a special little golden jigsaw piece, a golden jiggy platform that you have to stand on in that area. And once you go back to that area, you have to hand over a bunch of jiggies you've collected throughout the game, and then that opens the final level, Click Clock Wood. But I remember when I was a kid, I had no idea what that place was. I just thought it looked very magical and whimsical, and I was wondering, like, what is this? There's nothing in here. And so eventually in the game, when you get far enough to a point where it hints you that you got to go back to that area, it's like, oh, that's cool. So Treasure Trove Cove, this is a very memorable level. I love the music and atmosphere. This is also the level where Kazooie learns how to fly. But unfortunately, she can only fly in certain areas. You have to find a certain path that has like 3 red feather symbols on it, and that allows Kazooie to take flight. Yeah, I love the little gruesome details they add to defeating the enemies. How a lot of them just burst into like cartoony pieces. See like their eyeballs bouncing around. I always loved how wacky this game's violence was. I mean, now compare this to like Mario 64, where defeating an enemy just has them poof in a cartoony way. So I love how Banjo Kazooie just went more over the top with its violence. Then another rare game went even more over the top of its violence, and that was Conker's Bad Fur Day. It basically wondered, okay, what would the violence of Banjo Kazooie be like if it was bloody? But I also love how, like, when you fly all the way up to, like, this lighthouse at the top, I love how the music just gets silent and you hear just, like, ocean breeze and seagulls. I just thought it was really atmospheric. I also like how occasionally you see, like, little sun glare beams, reflecting off into the camera. That was a really cool touch. Like at this time, the only video games I'm familiar with that had that effect were this and another game that came out the same year, which was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. But if you think the visual effects in this game look pretty great, wait till you see the sequel, Banjo Tooie. Banjo Tooie really upped the graphics. So then here's like a little... Like, it's hard to say if this game had boss fights or not, but this is what I'd consider a mini-boss. You just attack him 3 times, he's really easy to beat, and then after he just vanishes. The only real true boss fight I can think of in this game is, well, 2 actually. There's King Boombox, or whatever his name was, from Rusty Bucket Bay. He was like a giant TNT box you had to fight. Like, that was the only one that actually felt like a boss fight, because it was a little lengthier than, like, for, say, this. And he was definitely a much bigger character. And then, of course, the true boss fight in this game is the final boss. Now, that's a lengthy and challenging one that will test your limits. I always loved the inside of the hermit crab shell. I always loved how it was somehow bigger than it appeared on the inside compared to the outside, but I loved the colors and I liked the music. Yeah, you just don't see enough video games like this anymore. You don't see like all these colorful looking environments. They try making everything run on some kind of like lighting physics engine, and I don't know. I kind of miss like the days of cartoony but detailed, and that's what I'd want to see. So I feel like if they ever try, you know, one thing I hate is when video game companies try making video games cartoony, they end up making them look too simplified to the point where you can point out how an N64 game had a little more attention to detail in certain areas, despite its limitations. So I like games that have like a blend of cartoony and detailed. So games like Conquer Live Reloaded or Cameo Elements of Power. So I was not a huge fan of the graphics they used for like Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, which was the 3rd entry in this series. They tried making everything look more detailed, but they tried exaggerating how it looked on the N64 as well. So they made like everything look like it was made out of some kind of arts and crafts material. And Banjo Kazooie, oddly enough, looked blockier than they did on the N64. That was apparently the joke. Where I thought, oh, they look blocky on the N64, so we thought it'd be funny if we made them look even blockier in HD. And so it's like, haha, funny joke, but that doesn't explain like why Conker didn't look like that in HD, or why You know, it's like, why didn't he look like how he did on the box art from the N64 games? That was pretty detailed, and I like how for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, they actually bothered restoring that original design. That was the best Banjo and Kazooie have ever looked inside a video game, in my opinion. They looked loyal to how they were supposed to look in the promotional art. So here I activated one of the little cheat codes that I got from playing Bottles as a minigame, and it for some reason turns Banjo's head enormously big and wobbly. It's really weird looking, but... So, I think it would be fun to just kind of go through, like, all the transformations you can get from those weird cheats. Don't worry, I'm going to speed things up. So, this one, it makes Banjo's paws extremely big. Oh boy. I've seen some really weird sides of DeviantArt to know it. This is probably someone's fetish. Ugh. This one's kind of cool. Most of these cheats only affect Banjo, and so this one affects Kazooie. It makes her head and wings a lot bigger, which can create some little funny visuals. I remember that thing terrified me as a kid, the shark. Now all of a sudden Banjo looks like some kind of wiener dog. Stretched out body and tiny head. This looks weird. He looks almost like Crunch Bandicoot from Crash Bandicoot. Carry me, Kazooie, I don't feel so good. This one's pretty much the same thing, except it's mixed with the big paw cheat. Then this is the final one you get, and this is the craziest. It just turns Banjo into a washing machine. But the funny thing is how it turned Kazooie invisible, apparently. So you control Banjo normally like you did the other cheats as well, but except he's a washing machine, and he looks sad as hell. So fun fact though, I'm not sure if this was intentional, but I liked how they actually turned this into a full transformation in Banjo Tooie. And what I mean by that is how he actually plays like some kind of anthropomorphic laundry machine in Banjo Tooie. He actually has like a set of wheels that he rolls around on, and he has the ability to shoot clothing at enemies, and also the ability to clean like, there's like some filthy workers in that level where you get the transformation, and they want you to clean their clothes. So once you clean all the clothes of like the filthy employees, they'll reward you. And so yeah, I thought that was cool how this goofy transformation ended up actually being part of a level in Banjo Tooie. So weird. Let's see, off to Clanker's Cavern. Now this is a level I feel mixed about. I mean, I think Clanker himself is really cool and creepy, but Other than that, I don't feel like this level is very memorable. It's mostly just a real boring underwater level where you just swim through a bunch of tunnels and try to keep your air levels up, and the other chunk of it is just exploring the inside of Clanker. I don't know, like, this honestly feels like the smallest level in the game, but they just add too many branching paths and objectives. I remember that scared me the first time as a kid, but keep in mind, I had the volume up real high when I was a kid, so it's easier to, like, know what's gonna happen nowadays, but as a kid, I had no idea that monster was gonna come bursting out, and I just kind of remember, like, that being a jump scare. But I know a lot of people were scared of Clanker when they first saw him, especially because considering when you first enter this level, he's trapped in a lower level of the water. So it's like right when you swim into this area, he's staring you straight in the face with his big bulging eyes, his sharp-looking teeth, and surprisingly, Clanker is a good guy though. He's a poor victim of the villain Gruntilda. She uses him as a garbage disposal. And so I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're probably wondering, what the heck is that thing? And apparently he's a mechanical whale. Yeah, I always thought he would have been a shark, but he's apparently a whale. I gotta say, Clanker looks, although creepy, he looks amazing for an N64 character. A little too creepy though, because yeah, like I always thought like one of the most disturbing things of him wasn't his bloodshot eyes or his grungy looking teeth, but it was actually you'll see what I mean. This. I cannot tell if that was supposed to be rust, but to me, I saw that as flesh and blood. I just thought that was really disturbing. That's one thing I loved about video games from Rareware. They usually put in some pretty dark stuff, even in their E-rated games, and it challenged you. As a kid, it's like some of the stuff just really kind of disturbed you, but it pressured you to keep moving forward. Try to be as brave as the characters you're controlling. And so yeah, I really feel like a lot of these video games toughened me up over the years. You know, they caused me to tackle things I wasn't used to seeing, and really left an impact. So although Clanker's Cavern isn't the most memorable level in the game, I still wouldn't call it the worst, though. I'm sure a lot of you already know what the worst level in this game is. I'm probably not going to get to that until a much later video, though, but I'll give you a hint. It's the one with the giant boat. Or better yet, I should say it's the one with the infamous engine room. So yeah, I can't tell if Clanker is... They call him a mechanical whale, but if you ask me, he seems to be more of a cyborg, because he appears to have flesh. The inside of him looks fleshier. That does not look like rust or metal. That looks like flesh. His bones look like they're made of metal, but... And there are those creepy little tentacle things called the whiplashes. So yeah, one thing I love about this game is how, although every level has like the same, well, every level like shares like a melody, but for different sections they'll change like the tune of it though. They'll change the instrumentation or the pacing to really set the mood for certain levels. So like when you're inside Clanker, it uses the same theme from Clanker's Cavern, but it gives it more of a hollow kind of sound to make it sound like you're inside of some kind of like metal contraption in a way. And especially noticeable like during the underwater parts of the game where it tries making everything sound more soothing and quiet. Now I don't know why, but this is always one of my favorite rooms in the hub world. I just love the I love the colors of all the plants and the water, and I also love like that giant Gruntilda statue they have. I thought that was really cool. Yeah, like most video games around this time, like they had very basic textures for like grass. They would just use the color green, and it made the grass look really boring. And I love how Banjo Kazooie, they added all these little splotches of color to make it look like there's a lot in the grass. Because in real life, grass isn't just the color green. There can be a lot of things, little patches of dirt, little shredded leaves, little plants, and so I love how they created the illusion of that by making like this little speckled effect. You see like all these multiple colors in the textures, make it look like there's more than just grass there. So it really makes me want to see a remake of this, see what it looked like if they had it have like rendered grass, you know, and God, I'm just dying for a remake. I would love to see this with more detail added to it. Keep the colorful, cartoony nature, but add a little more realism to it. Those are always my favorite games. I hate games that look too realistic, and I hate games that look too cartoony. I like it when there's a real good combination, where it's cartoony but detailed. Like, I think the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro remakes did a pretty good job at trying to find a compromise between those two. Well, more for Crash. Spyro, it looked a little cartoonier character-wise, but environment-wise it looked more detailed. And that's what I'd want to see for a remake. I'd love to see the characters still contain their cartoony nature, but I'd love to see the world still have its colorful appearance, but I'd like to see a little more detail. Better lighting, better shading. Now, Banjo Kazooie, it had better lighting and shading, something that the original game was kind of lacking. It didn't really have any lighting effects or anything like that, or heavy shadow effects. But that's what was really cool about some of these early Rare games, though, because a lot of these video game hardware didn't have, you know, like a proper lighting engine like most video games use nowadays. They were able to somehow make like little shortcuts where a lot of the texture sheets, they would manually add in like different hues or shades to make it look like there's an actual shadow or lighting effect going on with certain surrounding objects. Banjo Kazooie was actually able to take that further by actually adding some actual lighting effects. They had to do like little visual workarounds to get it done though, but it's still really cool. Before that, though, I'd say Donkey Kong 64 actually did it first, though. But Banjo Kazooie perfected it a little better. So yeah, Donkey Kong 64, that was being made around the same time as this game. It didn't come out until about, like, a year later, 1999, and Donkey Kong 64, that's a pretty underrated game, too. I'd love to see that game get a remake, but compared to Banjo Kazooie, that one would need a lot more work. I'd honestly rather see a reboot than a remake, because there's a lot of things in Donkey Kong 64 that game would be better off without. But... So I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, right now I'm in the level Bubble Gloop Swamp. It's just as you expect, a giant gloopy swamp. I know it looked like I was hurting this poor guy, but actually, oddly enough, according to the game, I was helping him. His feet were cold, and he actually felt relieved when you put his, when you pounded his feet to cause him to tuck it in. And, after all that, he then, coughs out a jiggy and thanks you for getting that out of his throat. And so, it looks a little more gruesome when you replay this scene without, you know, that context. It looked like I was beating the crap out of the poor guy. So the turtles are gone. Earlier in this game, like when you went into this area, there's a little musical, like Simon Says challenge you had to do, where you had to ground pound on all these turtles and make them make music. And when revisiting this area, though, the turtles are gone. So it's like, in a remake, if they were to recreate that scene, I would prefer them getting rid of the part where you actually get hurt if you fail to memorize. I thought that was a little too strict. It made no sense that you got hurt for doing something wrong, and so no, this is the part of the game I would change drastically. So originally, like, you don't know, like, what's on the other side here, but apparently getting through this maze takes you to, one of Mumbo's huts that gives you a transformation. It turns into a crocodile. That's cool and all, but What really bugs me is how lengthy it is to get there when revisiting. Now, you can get a shortcut when you're already the crocodile, because the crocodile can just sneak through a little opening that he's short enough to crawl through, but as for Banjo and Kazooie, they have to go quite a long way every time to get there, and so, in a remake, I would like to see them where you only have to go down the long way once, but then once you get here, there's like maybe a switch or something you can activate, so Banjo and Kazooie can take a shortcut to get back here. It would make revisiting this level a lot more pleasant. I don't like having to rework your way all the way there just to transform into a crocodile again. But speaking of the crocodile, now the crocodile is definitely the best transformation in this game. He's the only one who can actually attack victims. He has a bite attack. So he's the only enemy who doesn't... Well, he's the only character who doesn't have to bother running away from enemies. You can actually just take them out by chomping them up. They didn't model the entirety of the inside of the crocodile's mouth. Looks pretty hollow. Yeah, I remember I was shocked when I first played this game. I wasn't expecting you were actually able to go inside that crocodile's nose. I thought that was just for show, but you know, I was just goofing around. Like, I remember I was playing this with my sister, and we were just kind of laughing, and I remember, like, one of us said, like, I'm just gonna go inside the nose, and then all of a sudden it worked. It's like, what the heck? I did not see that coming. And so, yeah, there's a pretty unmemorable challenge during this part, but it starts off easy, but gets pretty hard. No, don't eat the crocodile, you sick turtle. Wee, woo, wee, woo. Well, that's all I have to show for now. I'll have about like 2 more episodes of me goofing around this game, so thank you for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.